The crimson door swung open with a groan that felt less like wood and more like the tearing of flesh. Light bled out from the threshold, thick and pulsating, staining everything in hues of scarlet. My double stepped forward first, flanked by two of the faceless ones whose helmets now blazed like dying stars. Their boots struck the ground in perfect rhythm, echoing down the corridor that stretched beyond. I staggered after them, though I wasn't sure how. My body should have been gone, dissolved into ash. Yet I remained, half transparent, each breath scattering motes of dust into the air. The corridor stretched into infinity, its walls lined with door after door, each one trembling as though something inside pressed against it. The handles rattled, frames bulged, wood creaked under invisible pressure. From within came muffled cries. No, not muffled, but muted, as though the walls swallowed sound whole. Still, I recognized the shapes behind frosted glass windows inset into some of the doors. Faces, hands, eyes wide and desperate. They weren't strangers. They were me. Every door held a Michael, writhing, pounding, begging to be released. I stopped in horror, my chest tightening as one pair of eyes locked with mine from the other side of the glass. Bloodshot, frantic, unmistakably my own. The figure inside slammed his fists, his lips forming words I couldn't hear but could still read. "Let me out." His fists cracked the glass, but it healed instantly, sealing him in again. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. My double didn't react. He walked calmly past the doors, as if the endless parade of imprisoned selves were nothing more than scenery. The faceless ones guided him, their crimson glow intensifying with every step. They ignored me completely, as if I were beneath notice, or perhaps as if they couldn't see me at all. I trailed behind like a shadow, desperate not to be forgotten. The corridor hummed with a low, vibrating drone, a sound that seemed to pulse in my teeth and skull. Each door vibrated in time with the sound, rattling violently, like an orchestra of locked cages straining to burst. I pressed my palms to my ears, but it didn't help. The drone was inside me. I whispered to myself, trying to anchor to the last fragment of identity I had left. "My name is Michael Brennan. My name is Michael Brennan." The words came out faint, already crumbling. A surge of panic rose as I realized even here, even clinging to repetition, my name felt less like a truth and more like a lie. My double looked stronger than ever, his outline sharp, his gait confident, while I flickered like a bad signal. He didn't even glance back. Why would he? In his world, I'd already been erased, but I hadn't. I knew I hadn't, because something stirred in the corridor itself. The doors around me pulsed brighter, and the voices behind them rose above the drone. They weren't random screams. They were fragments of memory, of thought. The motel, the gates, pixel. Remember, they overlapped, distorted, some younger, some older, all me but not me. My knees buckled, and I pressed my forehead to the cold ground, trembling. Then, amid the chaos, a voice whispered directly into my skull. Clear, steady. You were not erased, you were stored. I froze. The words vibrated in my chest, cold and absolute. Stored? The idea wormed into me, sickening. What if I wasn't gone, not erased, but catalogued, like the others behind these doors, shelved away as failed drafts? My head snapped up, staring down the corridor at the endless line of red-stained doors. Each one rattled harder now, each Michael pressing closer to breaking through. I realized with a shudder that every failure had been locked here. Every Subject MB that didn't make it past the rules, past the motel, past the gates. My double glanced briefly at one door as a hand slammed against its glass, nails leaving bloody streaks before vanishing back into the dark. He smirked faintly, then turned back to the faceless ones. That smirk cut me deeper than the voice had. He knew. He knew what the corridor was, what it meant. And somehow, he'd been chosen to keep walking while the rest of us rotted behind glass. My chest burned with envy and despair, my fists clenching uselessly around nothing. I pressed closer to the nearest door, unable to stop myself. Inside, another Michael, pale, broken, eyes sunken, stared back. He mouthed something over and over until I finally recognized it. Not him. Not him. My skin crawled as the meaning hit me. The double walking ahead of me, the one the faceless guarded, the one they anointed. He wasn't the true original. He was just another chosen mask. And the voice inside me, the whisper promising I was stored, meant there was still a chance. I lurched forward, chasing after them, my body flickering with every step. The corridor seemed endless, each stride stretching into miles, the drone rising, the doors slamming in unison like a heartbeat of imprisoned selves. The faceless didn't turn. My double didn't falter, but the whisper followed me, curling around my bones like smoke. Stored does not mean lost. Stored can be retrieved. I stumbled, clutching my skull, torn between horror and hope. If I was stored, if I was one of countless shadows on these shelves, then maybe, just maybe, I could claw my way back into the world. But at what cost? To retrieve me, something else would have to be replaced. The crimson corridor pulsed violently, the doors shuddering as if they might burst all at once. My double walked steadily ahead, his outline sharper than ever, his presence undeniable. The faceless marched with him, guardians of his ascent. And I trailed behind, nothing but a phantom, with the whisper echoing in my mind like a promise and a curse. You were not erased. You were stored. The faceless ones halted as if on command. My double stood still with them, there, helmets glowing brighter, humming in a synchronized rhythm that shook the walls. For a moment the corridor fell into silence, except for the rattling of the endless doors. Then something fell from above. No, it didn't fall. It simply appeared, drifting down slowly until it landed inches from my feet. A book. Its cover was leather, but alive, twitching with faint pulses, as if it had veins beneath the surface. The title was carved in deep gouges across the front, Corridor Protocols. I reached for it instinctively, though my hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. The leather was warm to the touch, like skin under fever. I opened it, and the words bled across the page as if written in fresh ink, rearranging themselves until they formed a list. They weren't suggestions. They were rules. The letters shifted until they burned into my vision. Rule 1. Do not speak to the reflections. The moment I read it, the glass of the nearest door flickered, showing not just a Michael imprisoned inside, but dozens of my faces, layered over one another, each mouth moving in silent desperation. My throat tightened, instinct screaming to answer, but I forced myself to look away. Rule 2. Do not open a door if the knocking comes from the inside. As the words settled on the page, knocking erupted around me. Fists slammed against door after door, rhythmically, desperately, shaking the corridor itself. Some knocks were frantic, others slow and deliberate, as if the figures behind the glass knew I could hear them. My hands hovered over a handle without my permission. I yanked them back, trembling, heart pounding at the thought of what would happen if I gave in. Rule 3. If you see Pixel, she is not your ally anymore. My stomach twisted. The letters burned brighter, searing into me like a brand. I turned slowly, half expecting to see her then and there. She wasn't. But the memory of her golden eyes pressed against mine in the white room, whispering my weakness, returned so vividly I gagged. The book pulsed in my hand, as though it knew I wanted to deny this rule more than any other. Rule 4. At the 13th door, burn whatever you carry. The letters shook violently, bleeding across the page until I could barely read them. 13. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Burn whatever you carry. My eyes dropped to the book itself, heavy in my hands, and for the first time I wondered if the rules were self-destructive, written not to save me but to strip me bare. I slammed the book shut, but the words didn't leave me. They throbbed inside my skull, louder than the drone of the corridor, louder than the fists pounding from behind the doors. My double glanced back at me then, for the first time since the crimson door had opened. His eyes were calm, almost pitying, as if he knew exactly what I had just read. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The faceless turned and continued forward, guiding him deeper. I followed at a distance, clutching the book to my chest, unable to shake the feeling it had already bound itself to me. The knocking grew more violent the further we went. Some doors rattled so hard I thought they'd splinter, but they never did. The rules repeated themselves in my head, louder each time. Don't answer, don't look, don't trust, don't carry. I stumbled past one door where the reflection inside was my childhood self, 10 years old, wide-eyed, clutching a stuffed animal. His tiny fist knocked softly against the glass. His lips moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. My throat tightened with grief. I wanted to break the rule, to answer him, to pull him out. But when his eyes flickered gold like pixels, I stumbled back in horror and kept walking. The faceless hummed louder, the sound vibrating my bones. My double stride never faltered. He moved with purpose, like he already knew the path, the outcome, the final test. I trailed like a shadow, unraveling, whispering to myself, clinging to the rules even as I hated them. Every step brought us closer to a door that pulsed with deeper red than the others, looming ahead like a heart at the end of a vein. Door 13. I glanced down at the book again, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. The cover flexed under my grip, breathing. When I tried to close my eyes, the words burned behind my lids. Burn whatever you carry. I realized too late that the book had tricked me. By taking it, I'd already bound myself to the choice. By the time I reached door 13, it wouldn't be an option, it would be a demand. And somewhere, beneath the knocking, beneath the hum, beneath the drone of endless selves begging to be let out, I heard Pixel's voice slither through the corridor. You always break the rules, Michael. That's why they keep writing new ones. The corridor stretched endlessly, and with each step the air grew heavier, denser, as though I were walking through a storm no one else could feel. My double advanced ahead with the faceless ones, their red-lit helmets casting long shadows across the trembling doors. I tried to keep my distance, but no matter how far behind I lagged, the corridor never let me lose them completely. It bent and folded, stretching when I slowed, compressing when I hurried, like it wanted me to witness every moment. The book in my arms pulsed faintly, syncing with the rhythm of the knocks. I forced myself to look away from the faceless and toward the doors. The glass on one of them flickered like static, then cleared. What I saw wasn't just a reflection. It was a life. A Michael who wore a soldier's uniform, dust caked on his face, his body crouched in a ruined city. Gunfire lit the edges of his world, but his eyes locked on mine, filled with exhaustion and fury. His mouth moved, slow and deliberate, forming words I could hear not with my ears but inside my head. This was never your war, but you bled for it anyway. My chest constricted, a memory stirring that didn't belong to me. I stumbled past another door. Behind it sat a Michael in a pristine white coat, a doctor in a cold hospital room. He leaned over a bed where a child coughed weakly, tubes running from her arms. His face broke with grief as monitors screamed. He looked up suddenly, as though he could see me watching. If you'd remembered, he hissed, his voice leaking through the glass, maybe she wouldn't have died. My knees buckled. I didn't know this child, didn't know this man's life, yet guilt pierced me like a blade. The further I walked, the more of them I saw. A Michael in handcuffs screaming as guards dragged him down a corridor of steel. Another kneeling in a dark church, whispering frantic prayers to a God who did not answer. One sitting alone in a small apartment, cradling a photograph of a family I'd never known but felt in my bones. Each door peeled away layers of me, showing lives I'd never lived but somehow carried. Memories leaked through, flooding me until I couldn't tell which were mine and which belonged to these shadows. I clutched the corridor protocols tighter, trying to ground myself, but the words on the cover writhed, forming names I didn't recognize. Miguel Brenna, Michael Brannan, Monsieur Bernard. Each a variation of me, each tethered to a different door. I shook my head violently, refusing to accept them, but their faces pressed against the glass, demanding I remember. My breaths came ragged, each inhale dragging in not air but fragments of other men's lives. One door slammed so hard it cracked, a jagged line racing across the glass. The Michael inside pressed close, eyes wild, blood seeping from his mouth. His whisper reached me like nails scraping my skull. "Don't let him reach door 13. My blood froze. He slammed his hand again, and this time I understood the truth in his desperation. Door 13 wasn't just another threshold, it was the final rewrite, the place where all other versions were obliterated to make room for one. I stumbled backward, nearly colliding with another door. This one held an older Michael, gray at the temples, his face lined with exhaustion. He shook his head slowly, eyes wet with regret. "You don't get it," he said, voice low. "They're not choosing him. They're erasing us until only one story remains." His hand pressed against the glass, trembling. "And when he goes through that door, we'll all burn." The word burn echoed in my skull, linking to the rule written in blood across the page. At the 13th door, burn whatever you carry. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. The rules weren't survival, they were pruning, cutting away every branch that didn't lead to the chosen one. The motel, the gates, the white room, all of it was a funnel leading here. I wasn't just one man. I was one of many discarded echoes, shadows shoved into locked doors until the corridor had its victor. My chest heaved, fury rising. If my double reached door, 13, then all of us, every Michael in every door, would vanish forever. Ahead, the faceless ones paused, turning slightly as though they'd sensed my hesitation. Their helmets glowed brighter, humming in unison, and my double tilted his head, smiling faintly. He knew. He knew I had heard them. He wanted me to despair. My fingers dug into the pulsing book, nails sinking into the leather like it was flesh. For the first time since the White Room, a thought rooted deep in me. If I was only an echo, then maybe echoes could still fight back. The knocking grew louder, almost deafening now. Doors rattled in unison, the sound rolling like thunder. Behind the glass, countless Michaels pressed closer, shouting, screaming, begging. Some called for help, others cursed my name. But woven into the chaos, one voice rose above the rest, steady and sharp. "You're not erased. You're the memory they couldn't kill. And memories can burn." The words struck like lightning, searing through me. I forced myself back to my feet, though my body flickered faintly with every move. I staggered forward, closer to the faceless, closer to my double, closer to the 13th door that pulsed at the end of the corridor like a heart ready to burst. If this was a war of erasure, then I wouldn't let myself vanish quietly. I would be the memory that burned. I felt her before I saw her. The corridor shifted temperature, the scarlet glow bending, shadows lengthening unnaturally. My double and the faceless ones didn't notice. Their pace never faltered, their rhythm steady. But the air around me rippled like heat rising off asphalt. My chest tightened. It was the same sensation I'd felt in the motel whenever Pixel stared too long into the dark, her golden eyes unblinking. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. And then she was there, padding out from between two trembling doors, tail curling like smoke. Pixel looked exactly as she always had, small, sleek black fur shining faintly under the crimson haze. But her eyes were wrong, not just glowing, not just golden. They flickered like twin gateways, showing glimpses of things that couldn't exist, forests burning, children crying, a clock shattering in reverse. She tilted her head at me, and for one insane second, I wanted to reach down and scoop her into my arms to hold on to the only comfort I'd ever known. But the third rule screamed inside me. If you see Pixel, she is not your ally anymore. She meowed softly, the sound echoing down the corridor in ways it shouldn't have. It bounced off the walls, reverberated in the glass of the doors, and for an instant, every Michael inside stopped pounding. They froze, eyes wide, pressed against the glass to look at her. Pixel walked slowly between them, her paws leaving trails of faint gold on the ground. Each trail pulsed like veins, as though she were bleeding light into the corridor. My heart clenched, equal parts awe and dread. She wasn't my cat anymore. She was something else, something older, something woven into the experiment from the beginning. I whispered her name before I could stop myself. Pixel. Her ears twitched, and she turned sharply toward me. The warmth in her gaze was gone. She narrowed her eyes, and for the first time, I saw her teeth. Too sharp, too long for a cat's mouth. She hissed, and the sound wasn't a hiss at all. It was words, fractured but unmistakable. You were never chosen. You were kept. My knees buckled. The voice was layered, countless tones speaking in unison, a chorus of judges wearing my pet as their mask. Pixel leapt, not at me, but at one of the doors. Her claws struck the glass and it cracked instantly, spiderwebbing outwards. The Michael inside screamed silently, thrashing as golden fissures spread across his body. Then, in a blink, he was gone, shattered like glass, erased without sound. Pixel turned back to me, tail twitching, her golden eyes blazing. She had destroyed him effortlessly, one of the echoes wiped away like chalk on a board, and she hadn't needed to open the door. She was beyond rules. I staggered backward, clutching the pulsing book to my chest as if it could shield me. My breath came ragged, tears stinging my eyes. She was supposed to be mine, my anchor, my companion, my reason to survive the motel. But the realization gutted me. Pixel had never belonged to me. She had belonged to them. She was their sentinel, drifting between the worlds of Michael, keeping the experiment from collapsing. She was never a cat. She was a key. As I struggled to breathe, the doors around me began to whisper. Dozens of voices overlapped, all variations of my own, calling her name. Some begged, some cursed, some prayed. Pixel moved with indifference, padding along the glass like a judge inspecting prisoners. Each time she passed a door, the Michael inside recoiled in terror, knowing she could end him with a glance. I realized then that she wasn't here to choose me. She was here to measure me, to see if I could endure what the others could not. My double finally noticed her. He slowed, glancing back, his expression sharp, controlled, but for the first time I saw a flicker of unease in his eyes. Pixel stopped between us, her body low, her gaze shifting back and forth. For a terrifying second, I thought she might leap at him the way she had at the imprisoned echo. Instead, she sat down neatly, curling her tail around her paws as if weighing the scales. I whispered again, desperate. Pixel, please. My voice cracked, breaking into sobs. She tilted her head and her mouth opened, that impossible chorus spilling out once more. Love made you weak. Weakness is erased. The words punched through me harder than any physical blow. She had seen everything, every moment I'd clung to her in the motel, every time I'd whispered into her fur that she was all I had left. None of it had been real to her. To her, it was data. To her, it was failure. The faceless one stopped then, as if awaiting her judgment. My double turned fully, his smirk faint but undeniable, as if he already knew the verdict. I stared at her glowing eyes, my chest burning with grief and rage. She blinked slowly, then rose, padding toward me. Each step made the ground tremble, and with every tremor, I felt pieces of myself flicker, like static tearing through my body. She brushed against my leg, her fur burning cold as ice. Then she whispered again, soft, almost gentle, "Stored things can still be burned." The corridor shook violently, the knocking from the doors rising into a frenzy once more. Pixel walked past me, her golden trails lingering in the air, glowing brighter than before. She padded toward my double, who waited calmly, arms folded. For a heartbeat, I hoped she would destroy him instead. But she stopped at his feet, curling around his legs like a loyal pet. He reached down and stroked her fur, and she purred, a low vibration that shook the corridor itself. My vision blurred, my chest heaved. She had chosen, not me, never me. The truth pressed into me, heavier than the rules, heavier than the voices. Pixel had crossed between worlds not to save me, not even to test me. She had come to deliver me the cruelest truth. I was never meant to walk through door 13. The hum of the corridor shifted, deepening into a roar. At first I thought it was the faceless ones, amplifying their resonance, but no. The sound came from the walls themselves. Cracks raced along the scarlet surface, jagged veins of light splitting outward. The doors rattled so violently now that the glass shook in its frames, the muted screams behind them sharpening into audible howls. Every imprisoned Michael had awoken at once. The corridor wasn't holding. It was breaking. Pixel's purr became louder, vibrating in rhythm with the fractures crawling across the walls. My double stood firm, his smirk widening as though he had expected this. The faceless spread out slightly, their helmets glowing brighter, but even they seemed unsettled. I pressed myself against the wall, half flickering, half solid, trembling with the realization that the rules weren't holding anymore. The corridor wasn't meant to withstand rebellion from within. It was built to contain obedience, not fury. The first door burst open. Splinters of wood and shards of glass exploded outward, cutting my arms and face. From inside stumbled a Michael, whose skin was charred black, eyes burned to hollow sockets that still wept smoke. He screamed, and the sound was raw, more animal than human. Then another door cracked, then another, and soon the corridor flooded with them, failed versions of me pouring out, their bodies twisted, broken, incomplete. Some crawled on all fours, some dragged shattered limbs, some wept blood as they staggered forward. They didn't attack me at first. They swarmed past, converging toward my double and the faceless, their screams. Blended into one cacophony, a chorus of rage aimed not at me but at him, the chosen mask. He raised his arms and shouted something I couldn't hear, and the faceless moved in front of him like a shield. But the flood didn't stop. Door after door blew open, and with each explosion, the corridor itself shuddered, the crimson glow flickering like a dying light. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't carry me. My body glitched, fading in and out, as if the corridor didn't know whether to keep me or erase me. One of the broken Michaels collided with me, his hands clawing at my chest. His mouth opened, and my own voice screamed back at me. "Why him, not us?" I shoved him off, heart racing, the words echoing in my skull. Why him, not us? Why him, not us? The truth burned, because they had chosen, because they were erasing. And now the erased were fighting back. Pixel leapt into the chaos, golden trails burning behind her. She swiped at one failed Michael, and he shattered instantly, his body crumbling into ash. She slashed another, and his head split open with a flash of light. But for every one she destroyed, 3 more surged forward. The faceless tightened their formation, their hum escalating into a blinding pitch. The corridor pulsed like a living artery, and I realized with horror. It was alive. It was bleeding out through its cracks. The air thickened, the walls bending inward, compressing space. I staggered, clutching the protocol book, which pulsed wildly in my arms. Its pages fluttered open, words scrawling themselves in frantic ink: containment breach, protocol failure, erasure imminent. My vision blurred. The letters bled across the pages, dripping onto my hands like black tar. I screamed and threw the book down, but it fused to the floor, its cover splitting open like a mouth gasping for air. Ahead, my double roared, his voice booming louder than the screams of the echoes. "I am the original," he shouted, shoving one faceless aside. "Close the gates!" His eyes blazed with certainty, his smirk now sharpened into rage. The failed Michaels clawed at him, dragging him down, their broken fingers tearing into his skin. But even as blood poured down his arms, his grin didn't falter. He believed it. He believed he was the only one worthy. The corridor convulsed. The doors began collapsing inward, folding into themselves as though sucked by a black hole. Screams echoed, cut short as whole lives vanished into silence. My chest tightened with terror as I realized what was happening. The corridor was collapsing. Not just breaking, but consuming itself, dragging every echo into nothingness. If I stayed here, I would be erased along with them. Pixel landed in front of me, her golden eyes burning holes through me. She hissed, and the chorus voice tore into my skull again. "If he enters door 13, you will never exist. If you burn him now, you might." The words clanged inside me, a verdict and a temptation. I glanced at my double, writhing under the swarm of echoes, yet still laughing, still fighting toward the door at the end. My fists shook. Burn him. How? With what? The protocol book split wider, flames licking out from its pages. The corridor groaned, its ceiling cracking open to reveal not sky but endless void, a whirlpool of light and shadow sucking everything upward. The echoes screamed as they were lifted, their bodies unraveling into smoke. The faceless dug their boots into the ground, glowing brighter as they resisted, but even they flickered. My double clawed forward, inch by inch, his eyes locked on the blazing outline of door 13 pulsing at the corridor's end. He didn't care about the collapse. He cared only about being the one who made it through. I staggered toward him, the fire from the protocol book trailing behind me. My hands shook, my vision blurred, my breath came ragged, but the whisper wouldn't leave me. Burn him or burn yourself. My legs buckled, my body flickering harder with every step. Still, I crawled forward, gripping the flame, knowing that whatever I chose next would decide not just me, but every Michael, every echo, every shadow. The corridor cracked wide open, a final roar shaking everything apart. Door 13 blazed ahead like a dying sun. My double screamed, surging toward it. The faceless broke apart in static. Pixel crouched low, ready to leap, and I, trembling and broken, lifted the fire in my hands, the heat searing my skin, facing the impossible truth. Only one of us would leave this place remembered. The fire seared my hands, yet it didn't consume me. It was hungry, yes, but not for flesh. It wanted meaning. The protocol book lay behind me, split wide like an open wound, spilling flame as if the rules themselves had ignited. My double clawed forward, bloodied and grinning, his eyes locked on the glowing frame of door 13 ahead. The faceless were gone, dissolved into static, their humming replaced by the deafening chorus of countless echoes, shrieking as the corridor collapsed. Pixel crouched low, tail lashing, her golden gaze fixed not on him, not on the door, but on me. The corridor bent inward, walls cracking wide to reveal endless void beyond. Doors slammed shut one after another, some shattering into ash, others imploding into nothing. Echoes were dragged screaming into the rift, their bodies unraveling like smoke. My chest heaved, the fire burning hotter, whispering louder, "Burn him or burn yourself." The words weren't a suggestion. They were a command written into the marrow of this place. The choice had always been the same. Erase or be erased. My double dragged himself to his knees, blood dripping from his arms, laughter tearing from his throat. "I am Michael Brennan," he roared, his voice echoing louder than the screams around us. He pointed at me, sneering. "You're nothing but a shadow, a failed copy. This is my story, not yours." His words tore through me, because part of me believed them. Part of me always had. But then the doors around us flared one final time, revealing fractured glimpses of lives stolen. Michaels in uniforms, Michaels in chains, Michaels dying alone in beds, Michaels screaming in cells. All of them pounded against the glass, their voices merging into a single terrible chant. Not him, not him, not him. My head spun, the flames in my hands flaring higher, searing my skin until I screamed. Pixel hissed, her chorus voice slicing into me. Erase him or be erased. I staggered forward, each step agony, my body flickering harder, pieces of me fading in and out like broken film. My double rose to his feet, staggering but unyielding, and spread his arms wide. "Come on then," he bellowed. "If you're so desperate to matter, burn me. Burn the only real Michael left." His grin was wild, defiant. He believed his own lie so completely it twisted reality around him. The door behind him pulsed brighter, light spilling out like molten fire. The ground cracked beneath me, the corridor tearing itself apart. Chunks of scarlet wall collapsed into the void, dragging echoes with them, their screams cut short as they vanished. I clutched the flame tighter, my throat raw with sobs. I thought of the motel, of the neon sign, the vending machine, the white room, the whisper in the glass. I thought of Pixel curled against me once, warm and purring, before I knew what she truly was. And I thought of the message carved in steam on the mirror. "Remember, Michael." Pixel leapt then, soaring over the collapsing floor, landing between me and my double. Her golden eyes burned brighter than the door itself, her voice flooding the corridor. You were not erased. You were stored. This is the moment of retrieval. She turned her head toward me, slow, deliberate. Burn him, and you will be written back. The echoes screamed louder, their chant rising to a fever pitch. Not him. Not him. My double lunged for the door, his hand outstretched toward the blazing handle. The flame in my hand surged, roaring like a living thing, pulling me forward. My body shook, torn between terror and rage, despair and hope. If I didn't act, he would enter door 13 and I would vanish forever. If I did act, if I burned him, what would that make me? The survivor? Or just another version rewritten into his place? I stumbled forward, closing the distance. He turned, his face twisted in fury and triumph. You're too weak, he spat. You always were. He grasped the handle of the door. It blazed white-hot, light pouring across his skin. I screamed, raising the fire high above my head, the heat blinding, tears streaming down my face. Pixel hissed, her tail lashing, her voice booming inside my skull. Now, Michael, burn or be nothing. Time seemed to splinter. The corridor froze, every echo pressed against their glass, watching. The void hung still, the roar of collapsing space suspended mid-breath. Even my double paused, his hand. Trembling on the handle, eyes locked with mine. My chest heaved, the fire roaring higher, until all I could see was light and all I could hear was the word burn. And then I brought it down. The fire engulfed everything. My double's scream ripped through the corridor, his body erupting in a blaze of white gold flame. The echoes shrieked in unison, some in triumph, some in agony, as the doors shattered like mirrors breaking all at once. Pixel's form blurred, her body splitting into streaks of light, scattering across the collapsing walls. The corridor roared with a final deafening boom, and door 13 flung itself open. I was pulled forward by a force I couldn't resist, dragged into the blazing threshold. The fire consumed my vision, my body disintegrating, my name dissolving from my tongue. I heard one last whisper, soft and terrible, curling into my skull as I was swallowed by the light. You burned him. Now you are the original. And then, darkness.